Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the Oraculos True Divination Podcast, where I bring you ancient wisdom for the modern mystic. I'm your host, Mychal A. Bryan, and joining me today from all across America, I think, are my dearly beloved fellow Black Astrologers from our last Black Astrologers Roundtable, and we have some new faces. So first of all, I just want to say welcome to all of the wonderful friends of mine who have joined us here today on the show. Thank you so much for being here. So we have a lot to dive into today on the show, but before we get there, for those of you who this is your first time joining us here on the Oraculos True Divination Podcast, this is a podcast where I bring you interviews from astrologers all around the world who aren't just changing their own lives through their astrological practice, but they're also actively impacting this field of astrology that we all know and love. So if you want to be a part of the magic and the momentum that we're building here on the podcast, please do hit subscribe. Also, hit the notification bell so that you receive these notifications of when I bring you these interviews each and every week. Now, if you've been following the show for a while, you would have seen our last Black Astrologers Roundtable that we did earlier in the summer on Juneteenth. And it was such an amazing opportunity to be able to be a part of that, to hold space for that. And so I knew that as we were coming closer towards the end of 2020, that I wanted to create this space once again, to just sit down and be in this environment and really check in again with these astrologers who I know and love. So first of all, hey everyone, how's everyone doing?
Hey, Michael.
Hey.
Doing great.
Hey, Michael.
Good.
All right. So we have so much to dive into today. But before we get there, I just want to give everyone the opportunity to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about what your practice is, and also tell us how we can find you on all of the social media platforms and all across the internet so that our listeners and viewers can go and plug into your work.
Yeah, I'm Kira Taborn, also known as The Astrology online. I am a consulting astrologer. I do a lot of consultations, and then I also teach. I do webinars and summits and conferences, and also like tutoring sessions with student astrologers. I'm working on a course, which I'm really excited about. And then what else do I do? I'm the director of Fresh Voices in Astrology. We host monthly webinars and an annual summit for like up and coming or newer awesome astrologers. So check that out. And I am the host of the Astrology Show, which is a weekly podcast where we just nerd out over astrology. So yeah, you can find me at The Astrology on Instagram and at @theastrology_ on Twitter and theastrology.com.
Awesome sauce, Kira. Tracy?
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for creating this space, Michael. It's really good to be here and to see all of you again. My name's Tracy Rogers. I am also a consulting astrologer and a certified life coach. And so I blend the two services in my practice. I'm also an organizer and activist. And you can find me through my website, which is my name, tracylrogers.com. I'm Trey, T-U, T-R-A-E, the number 2, the letter U on Instagram. And you can find me at Tracy L. Rogers on Facebook as well. Thank you.
Sweet. Hi, I am Dr. Stormy Grace, and the doctor is not from astrology. It is business. I specialize in business astrology as well as being a consulting astrologer. And you can find me primarily on YouTube, where I host Eat and Greets, just 1,000 of them a month. I just love bringing people over to talk, and I love to eat. So that's how we got Eat and Greets. So when people come over, you're going to bring a dish, you're going to bring some astrology, and we're going to dish and talk about it and eat and relax and be in this community. It's beautiful. I am a consulting astrologer. I teach classes and I work with our organizations across astrology as well. So it's just a good time out here. And you can find me on YouTube at Stormy Grace. You can also find me at stormygrace.com. If you look for me on Facebook, it's Stormy Grace Astrology and Stormy Grace 0808 on Instagram, Twitter, and I think even Pinterest right now. Yes, I pinned myself.
Awesome sauce, Stormy.
Hey, what's up? I'm Zamboni. Zamboni Funk is how you can find me on Instagram. That's basically the place to find me, for real. I started out as a musician, which is where the funk piece came from. But I see funk and music as being very much the same thing, as being rhythmic cycles of timing. And so it's very much about getting in the groove and like doing the thing, riding the waves that come your way. And so I'm very much about sort of just trying to, I do consultations and I talk with people about their natal charts and stuff like that. My favorite thing to do is it's electional, which is to sort of choose an auspicious moment to begin your thing or whatever it is. I do a lot of forecasts. I do daily forecasts on Instagram and I do weekly forecasts on Instagram as well. And so the way that I treat those is very much like as if it's an election. So what is today good for is how I treat it. So it's practically minded, like how can we use astrology to live our lives better and more in harmony with what's going on. So that's what I do at Zamboni Funk on Instagram. You can find all the stuff there. Also Patreon. Check me out on Patreon as well, where we work together. There's a little community there. It's cute.
Awesome sauce. And Zamboni, I wasn't aware that you did daily forecasts. I have commitment issues, so I could never commit to doing that sort of thing every single day. So super kudos to anyone who can come up with daily forecasts because, it's real. Demetrius.
Hello, Demetrius Bagley here from Brooklyn. I am not a consulting astrologer. I am a producer astrologer. I work on the podcast Stars on Fire with Mychal, who joined us last time, and Janelle. I produced Queer Astrology Conference 2020. I'll come back to that when we open the discussion. And then forthcoming for me next is Black Astrology Conference. People can find me to talk about astrology on Twitter at VeganD. And Queer Astrology is a little confusing. You can go to queerastrology.com. You can also go to the conference site, qac.queerastrology.com.
Hey everybody, Cameron here. And I practice medical astrology. I practice herbalism. I've been practicing more Reiki a lot more lately too as well. Yeah. So I do a lot of different things and I tend to call myself an astrologer, especially like online, but back where I like cultivated my practice of everything back in Memphis, everybody knows me as an herbalist. So yeah, I just invite people to call me whatever they want to call me and know that when you come to see me, it's about finding like a holistic perspective of like the internal and the external and how they potentially reflect each other and how they reflect your body, emotions, mind, spirit, external reflections, so on and so forth. But you can find me at CA Dream 6 on Instagram, CA Dream 7 on Twitter, and then my website, CA Dream Planet, will be out before the beginning of next year because I'm starting to write articles for Yoga Journal next year. Some articles that are like called planetary invitations. It's more so like tapping into like, I guess some people are like as consciousness, and like how to ride the wave, like Zamboni was saying. So yeah, you can find me in those places.
Awesome sauce, Cameron. And I'm really happy that you told us that was CA Dream because I've been struggling for the past 4 months to try to pronounce that. I was like Cadre MP, Cadre Planet. So thank you so much for clarifying that.
Yeah. And I shout out to you because I've been learning so much about astrology in so many different ways from becoming a student from you. So I really appreciate you. It's helping my practice accelerate at like a really fast pace, and I'm loving it. So much love.
Awesome sauce, Cameron.
I am so blown away by the depth and the quantity that you really produce. I'm really impressed. Thank you for doing the work.
Thank you so much. Always. Sam Reynolds.
I am a consulting astrologer and teacher of astrology. I have my own classes. I also teach for the International Academy of Astrology, on which I am a board member. And I am also a co-founder, along with Dana Lynn Knuckles, of the International Society of Black Astrologers. And I have written horoscopes and for tarot.com, for ebony.com, for The Cut. And in terms of what else have I done? I also been on the board of directors for the Astrology News Service, and I'm also on the board of directors for the International Society for Astrological Research, and very much involved in that, and also involved in terms of diversity efforts at NORWAC, which is the Northwestern Astrology Conference. And I am happy to be here and support different endeavors that are happening, including like Zodiac the Vote, which is to get people out to vote and to have things happening. And for people who want to contact me, I'm very active on Twitter. So that's SF as in Fred Reynolds. And also you can use the same handle for Instagram, and on Facebook, it is Ebony Sky Talker. So, and then my website is unlockastrology.com.
Awesome sauce. Now, I'm going to put that information down below in the description box so that all of our listeners and viewers can have these points of contact for these amazing, amazing astrologers and plug into their amazing work. Now, Sam, you just mentioned NORWAC and some of the things that you're doing to assist NORWAC in navigating the waters of diversity. And I know one of them is the upcoming panel that's going to be at NORWAC in May 2021. Can you tell us a little bit about why that work is important work to be doing right now within our astrological community?
Well, it's been necessary in our community for a long time, and NORWAC, especially since 2015, has been doing something extraordinary, which is bringing a greater number of astrologers of color, but also from other spectra, which includes from different quote unquote sexual minorities, and also in terms of ability minorities, those who've been disabled in some way who haven't been able to attend a major conference. So since 2015, working with Laura Nalbandian, who wanted to build in more diversity in the conference, we've seen an experiment that's exploded. And when I say an experiment, it was an idea of, gestating something. And, there were some people who were of the mind with this initial drive that, well, you're going to have a bunch of people of different hues and diversities coming and then not really sticking around. And that's just proven just the opposite. There are at least 3 people who have come through NORWAC in terms of either just attending or through diversity scholarships, who now are part of this panel and part of 4, who are also in part of, growing in our community. So I think the race panel is a natural extension of the work that NORWAC has already been doing. And why that's important now is because race has become so important. It's always been important for us, right? But it's now somewhat in the frontispiece of the American consciousness. Now, we don't know how long it's going to stay there, but that's something that people are dealing with. So I think Laura came initially with the idea, and she asked me to head it up because she wanted to have a panel discussion. And there are actually a few people who I've asked, including yourself, Mychal, to be on the panel. And so out of the 6 people who are on the panel, 5 of them are Black. Or a person of color. There's only 1 person who is not. And that was my choice in terms of wanting that. It could have been an all Black panel, but I trust this one particular person who will step forward, and I can say his name. I don't think he'll mind that because I've asked him. It's Gray Crawford. And Gray Crawford has also studied race. So, and he also writes on that. So I think he's someone who can intelligently vibe in with us. So I think that's the overall reason why we're doing this and why I think it's important. I mean, one of the other things I'll say related to why it's important, there's a greater number of Black people who likely will be attending these events, coming from all different strata of of Blackness in society, right? And there's no monolith. And so astrologers haven't been used to that. And, you know, they also don't seem to, when I say astrologers, I mean white astrologers, mainly at these conferences, haven't been used to, you know, all these different streams of people coming in. So it's going to be a need to understand those changes. And, you know, I'm not just here or no one in the panel I'm asking to be there just to coddle with them, but it's also things for us to talk among ourselves in terms of entering these spaces, how we craft different levels of safety, how we also support each other. What are our issues that we want to talk about in relation to a panel? So these are all the things that are coming up, you know, and I think that are important for that kind of panel.
Now, Demetrius, you mentioned that you're going to be hosting, or you've been organizing the Black Astrology conference, and that's going to be coming up very soon. Can you tell us when that's coming up, and also why for you felt as if that was a necessary event to organize?
Yeah, I'm processing some of what Sam is saying, because I think I mentioned this before. I want to rewind a little bit and say, Sam and I sat on a panel with another Black astrologer and an Asian astrologer, both of whom are Canadian, in October 2011 at an astrology conference. So this is, and there was some ripples from white astrologers about, why do we need this? Why are you doing this? Some shifting minds during the panel or roundtable, and then some not changing minds after. I just want to give that little context, at least for myself, and maybe that stray listener, if not a lot of people. Fast forward 9 years. Let me back up and say that was SOTA, a state-of-the-art astrology conference, which in those days, when I was part of the staff, which I was for 2011 through 2016, these were held in Buffalo, New York, right? So upstate with respect to New York, or anywhere elsewhere in New York State. Working with Donna Van Toen on those conferences, working with Sam on UX, and worked on many astrology conferences. It's not only that they are predominantly white, which is not by design, but within astrology, the field, but it's the Western world, I would say, without trying to unpack that necessarily in this conversation we're all having. We need more astrology conferences, virtual and in person, right, on the other side of all the mask wearing. I still want to see, and if I can attend, I will. If I'm not invited, that's fine. All women on the roster, a majority women, which is usually what happens anyway, audience. I would love to see a BIPOC. And Kira may do that. I may do that. Someone else here may do it. Someone, listening may do that. We just need more quality astrology that's helping people in the world. It's such an amazing toolkit. So we need to feed my opinion, Moon and Cancer is, we need to feed each other with this sort of dialogue that we're having today. Thank you for having us here. And having us before, and everything you're doing, just underscoring what Zamboni is doing. We need a lot more content as astrologers, period. We need a lot more fortification as Black astrologers. So Black Astrology, conference, BAC, is about something Sam and I, among a few other people, have been talking about for at least 5 years. Partially 5 years ago, it was to see who's out here. And ISBA is approaching the Facebook group that Sam co-founded, is almost 1,000 members, largely in the US and disproportionately on the East Coast of the USA. But there are people, I think we're in all, the 8 of us here are in all 4, I'm not sure which time zone you're in, Michael, since you're not in the US, but we're 3 or 4, maybe even 5 time zones here. That's its own, I hesitate to say diversity, but right, a point of difference. I want to nudge this, and Kira may or may not speak about it tonight, but I know you've tweeted about it. One of the things that worries me coming into this decade that isn't necessarily about race, but yet is, because race is connected to politics, or even is politics, and is connected to money globally, is these conferences, I would argue they're not expensive, definitely not for a US dollar. If you don't have a US dollar, yes, they are. and I've been to many and script and saved and so I have my biases. But if we want to really diversify and strengthen astrology as a field, as practitioners, not just the new voices, not just the emerging voices, not just the strays, we've got to welcome more people, which is tricky, right? The DNC, the Democratic National Committee, can tell you about how Big Tent is very tricky. But we still need to move towards that, because these boomers, as far as I know, unless they've got some amazing microchips installed, they're not going to be around forever. And we need new books and we need new business models. And we have to embrace Zoom as we are tonight, and microphones at home and, right? A long list without me going on much longer. But why is it happening? I want it. I know the levers to push. I've been volunteering in this community for 12, 14 years. I have bow to other people's needs and wishes for how they want to see a conference shape, and many other events, not the least of which are meetups. I'm at that middle age now where I can pull those levers, and this is what I want to see. If it were more appropriate, I would co-produce an all-women's roster majority audience. I don't know that is the case. Different conversation, probably for a different night. But we just need more quality, and Sam will get on me, maybe Cameron or Kara will too. We need more books. We need more podcasts. We need more podcast episodes. We need to feed people. There are 7.5 billion people on the planet. Not to say they all want any sort of astrology, but I'd say 1/10 or 1/5 of them do. And there's just not enough out there right now. And it's how we can make a living. And to Kira's earlier point, we can nerd out while we're on the payroll clock. Let me stop there and say, why, Mychal? Because I want it, I can do it, and other people want to be on that virtual stage, and a lot of people want to be in that virtual audience. So let's feed them. Let's feed everybody.
You know, as you were speaking, Demetrius, I remembered an interaction that I had with an older white astrologer a little bit earlier in the summer, when she was telling me how she recently got a Black student who reminded her of me. And I was like, oh, wow, that's so cool. You should tell him to join ISPA on Facebook, or you should tell him to get in contact with Sam. And her question to me was, why? Why is that an important thing to do? And I said, well, it's the International Society of Black Astrologers, and you now have this Black student coming in. And I mean, it's good to be able to connect, and it's good to know that there are other people who come from a cultural setting that's similar to yours, and not even talking about Black as a skin color, but talking about Black as a culture. And she was like, well, I don't necessarily think that that's important, and I don't believe that there's a Black astrology or a white astrology, and what do you all do in that group? What makes it different from regular astrology? I'm like, it's not about that. It's about...
It's better.
Yeah. But the conversation went on and on and on, and it made me feel so fundamentally uncomfortable, because here I realized that here was one of the trailblazers within our field of astrology who was outrightly saying, no, I will not tell my Black student that there is a group specifically dedicated to Black astrologers, because I don't want to bring race into the equation. And if he finds you all, then so be it, but I'm not going to be a vehicle for that to happen. That hit me like a bag of bricks. And Tracy, I want to pass this over to you, because I know that you've done work in terms of activism as well. When someone says, why does there need to be an event that highlights people of color, or that specifically highlights Black voices, or that specifically serves as a gathering point or a home for the Black astrological voice, what would you say to them?
I would say because something like that doesn't exist. I would say that how we look at astrology, how we are taught astrology, comes from a white lens. I would say that it's not a diverse enough field. I would say that why not? Why not introduce more inclusivity and diversity when it comes to this broad field in and of itself, and how it could be made even better in the process? My response would be, why the hell not? And then I'd say, screw you. I don't have time to convince you of why. I'm just going to do what Demetrius did and create a Black Astrologers conference, So that would be my response. And it's interesting because I remember talking to an astrologer who was taking courses, and her teacher was white. She herself was African American, and she expressed feeling somewhat conflicted because she was learning from this old school white woman, knowing that she wasn't getting the real nuts and bolts and meat of astrology, and feeling frustrated because she didn't, this is part of the reason why she connected with me. She didn't really know where to go to get the other diverse lens when we come to teaching astrology. And so it makes me wonder overall if white astrologers are becoming fearful of the rising of BIPOC astrologers. It makes me wonder to what extent do we want to ask for a seat at the table at this point, as opposed to just creating the table ourselves. But yeah, that would be my response to someone who, was just completely against and resistant to, the request that you made. So.
Well, thanks a million for that, Tracy. And it's still something that I'm a little bit conflicted about because, one, this is someone who I considered a friend and a mentor for a very long time. But at the same time, I find it very difficult to allow myself to be in those sorts of spaces. And I think more and more as we dive deeper and deeper into 2020, I'm very sensitive about the sort of spaces I allow myself to be in astrologically. Now, following this concept of creating a table for oneself, Stormy, I think that you are one of the astrologers amongst us and within our community who has definitely, there is no seat at the table. You've created your own table and you are really successful at what it is you've done. How did that come about for you? And how did you allow yourself to kind of navigate these realities of being a Black astrologer, as well as being so prominent within the community, especially here on YouTube?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. And, I think the entire idea that I had in most of the things that I do was to create a space where if you want to learn astrology, you can come and you can do that. And that is it. That is it. Black, white, tan, anything in the middle. If you want to learn astrology, I wanted to create a space where astrology could be the focus of what was happening. And so that is essentially what I did. Is I created a business model and have followed that is inclusive, right? To whatever you've got going on your side of the table. If you want to come, you are welcome here. And that has, I think, in and of itself made a lot of space for a lot of diversity in and of itself, because people feel welcome on the basis of that fundamental root of what are we doing over here. I'm not doing white astrology, Black astrology, Hispanic astrology. I'm just doing some astrology over here. And if that's your jam, come on. And that has served me well, I think, in the arena of astrology, but it's served me well in the arena of my education as well. That if I focus in on the common core root of what we're trying to achieve here, that makes a lot of space for a lot of different voices to just naturally show up and bring their own lens, so then we get to understand it just a little bit different. So I don't know. I think that is if I really evaluate it, that's it. I rooted in on a common thing and then made space. That's it.
Kira, when you were on the panel at the Astrology in the World Events Summit not too long ago, you mentioned this concept of creating more mentorship opportunities and creating more affordable access points of astrology within the world at large. And I think that you were specifically speaking about communities that weren't being served, or communities that probably didn't have all of the resources to really plug into a deep astrological education like some of the rest of us. Can you tell us why you think that that's an important thing for the current astrological community to really cultivate, this concept of affordability, as well as this concept of creating tangible and real quality access points for minority groups and people of color?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm pretty much all about accessibility. So accessibility means a lot of things, but part of that means affordability as well, like being able to access the content or learning. And I think, I just had 2 clients today. I offer a student astro reading just for people who are learning, basically. And it basically serves the purpose to like allow people to talk to an astrologer, people who've been studying by themselves and, just want to talk to someone about it. Oftentimes it's people who don't have other astrologers in their lives, like we're blessed to be able to have. So yeah, it's really fun. A lot of times it's their first readings, they haven't been able to talk to someone about this language they've been studying. And it's just so important, in my opinion, for people who are entering into this community to be able to have an access point to an astrologer, like someone who knows what they're talking about. And even if, it doesn't have to be like the best astrologer, but someone else who speaks the language. And so, yeah, I just find it to be such an important stepping stone in one's like journey in learning astrology is being able to speak the language with someone else, because it's really hard to like move past a certain point, especially when we're talking about astrology, which is so much about language. It's really hard to move past a point if you don't have another person to bounce that off of. And I think traditionally people had teachers. And by traditionally, I mean like, way back when, before the internet, right? People were learning this from other people. There was a student-teacher relationship there, and we've lost that over time. This definitely still exists, but in different ways. Like I never had an astrology teacher. I've taken classes here and there, like workshops maybe. I feel like I have teachers, but they might not know they were teaching me, right? It's people whose books I read, whose podcasts I listen to, whose lectures I attend, what have you, whose tweets I read, right? So we have a lot of teachers, but that student-teacher relationship has kind of been lost over time. And I think, it'd be great to bring that back in some way, shape, or form. And yes, there are people who, have courses. I'm about to make a course. You have a course, like Sam has a course. There's that exists. And I think that's amazing. I think we need more teachers, especially Black teachers, more people making courses, but keeping them accessible. And I think there are a lot of accessible courses out there. I'm not like bashing anyone who has a course. I just think that like continuing that and making, offering scholarships for your courses to, certain people, offering sliding scale to certain groups. I'm not saying you have to give everything away for free or you have to give everything away for like a lower price than what you think. It's costs, but at the same time, remember that there's ways to serve more people, and that includes things like sliding scale prices and scholarships and things like that.
Awesome, Kira. Now, Cameron and Zamboni, the two of you practice very specific fields of astrology, and they aren't the typical natal astrology that most people are used to plugging into. I know, Cameron, earlier you mentioned that you practice medical astrology, and Zamboni, you mentioned practicing or leaning more heavily towards electional astrology. So I'd like to hear from the two of you, and we can start with you, Cameron. What attracted you so deeply to the medical astrology model, and how do you think you've been received within the community at large as a Black man holding medical astrology knowledge within yourself?
Great question. Love it. So I came to medical astrology mostly because I pretty much came into astrology completely from like an alchemical perspective or alchemical lens of, the sister sciences, right? And like knowing plant medicine and how that goes into astrology, how it goes into alchemy, how it goes into this and that, and seeing like life and reality from that perspective first, right? So then I entered into astrology as an herbalist. So I was drinking tea one day and it was like, you see that over there? Because when I drink tea, I get all like in it. So it's just context, like I get all in it. And it was like, you see that over there? And then I like looked up and it was just a planet there. And it was like, you should learn. And I just started asking everybody around me that I knew, because I was working at a spiritual supply store at that time, asking people like, do you know about astrology? I just started asking everybody. Nobody really knew. So I just went on a journey to try to learn any type of astrology I could. I picked up like every astrology book we had in the place I was working at. And naturally, when I found medical astrology, the first person I saw was Judith Hill. So I like looked at all the content that I could find online from her, and I couldn't really find that much. But I took what she said, and I literally just applied it to my herbalism practice. And I observed, and I'm a very trial and error person. So me seeing so many people over and over and over and over, just patterns naturally come up, So my medical astrology was, a lot really based off of trial and error, and also connecting the plants to the planets to help the people, and how they're all a reflection of the one thing in my synthesis of my mind. So that's how I got into medical astrology. And I do natal astrology. In the beginning I did natal astrology more because the people in my community wanted more natal astrology. Even though I was practicing medical astrology every day, the people in my community, astrology's not even on their radar. It's not even on their radar. So I would just be asking people questions, getting feedback, And I continuously did that until, I just found all the patterns. And then I came across evolutionary astrology. And that's when that clicked into my like psychological, because I have a degree in psychology. I clicked into my psychology background, and I took that into like consciousness and how consciousness goes with the plants. And then, so it's just, everything just synthesizes over and over and over again. Honestly, when I'm online, like I said, I'm an astrologer. When I'm at home in Memphis, I'm an herbalist. When I'm by myself, because I practice yoga, and everything just synthesizes in my head, and I use it to be relatable, really. I just use it to be relatable because some of these things are all one thing in my head, but I don't like to talk about it like that because it gets all like intuitive and blah, and people like see it that way. But I'm literally like, no, like Pisces is like Neptune is like the lymphatic system, because if the lymphatic system is like foggy or it's like clogged up, it's not flowing, and you'll deceive yourself because you can't see clearly. And sometimes Pisces tend to have that habit as well. Are they the same thing? No. Do they reflect the one thing that is this energetic force? Yes. So long-winded answer, but that's my reflection.
Awesome sauce, brother man. Zamboni, electional astrology. I think I know literally one other person, and by one other person I'm referring to Drew, who specifically is out in these astro streets focusing primarily on electional astrology. So how do you get into that, and how do you think that's been received in a world where people's only contact point is usually natal astrology?
Sure. Well, the way that it is received is, like, no, nobody knows what I'm talking about. They hear election and they're like, Trump, Biden, right? And it's like, that's not what I mean. But so, like my spiritual practice is pretty serious. I pray a lot, and I do, I have like a pretty serious ancestor practice and all this sort of stuff. And so when I sort of like tipped into being spiritually serious, then, you know, that was when I started learning astrology seriously. And I realized that astrology was good magic to know things by. And so when I realized that, then I was like, well, how do you do magic to do things? And right at that time, Austin Coppock was offering a course on talismans, on making astrological talismans, and it seemed right up my alley, and so I took it. And so he was teaching concepts that are present in the Picatrix. It's not only in the Picatrix. There's like Agrippa, and there's a bunch of other texts as well. But the Picatrix is kind of like the big book of astrological magic. It's sort of like a go-to text. And the fun fact, the Picatrix was written by Moorish astrologers in Spain. And so while we're on the subject of Black people and astrology, some of the strongest astrological magic, or most serious magic that has ever been developed, was developed by Black people and written down by Black people. And then taught to me by a white person. And so, so it's like, it's a complex relationship, but so I sort of take the principles which are inherent in the Picatrix, which is basically, you look at the sky to see when a particularly auspicious time is. Let's say you want to talk to Jupiter, so you wait until Jupiter is rising in a sign that he likes, and the moon is making a nice aspect, basically. And then in that moment, you make a special prayer to Jupiter, and Jupiter blesses you with all the Jupiter things that are possible, right? That's the basic sort of premise. And then so, I sort of started to wonder what would happen, how serious does this ritual have to be, and it turns out that, like, not that serious. If you want some, like a talisman, an object that will outlive your body because it's made of stone or something like that, then the ritual has to be pretty serious, and the election, more importantly, has to be super serious. But if what you want to do is describe outcomes, like if I start a thing now, then we can look at the sky and see how the sky is going to describe the outcome that happens here. That is commonplace. That happens all the time. Anytime something is started, then this happens here. And so I just sort of like took a real interest in that, and took an interest in sort of being able to manipulate or handle the future in a kind of way that would bring me best outcomes. And so I've been using that ever since, and I really love it. I think that it's great. I think it's a really, it's magic that you don't have to do any kind of prayer or ritual or any kind of ceremony around. If you just start on time because you know about timing, then you can get better outcomes than if you didn't.
I really love that, Zamboni. And I've described, I think, in my Fresh Voices talk, that electional astrology is essentially reverse horary. Whereas in the horary chart, you're going to the sky and you're wanting to see what the chart for that moment is. In electional astrology, you're actively saying, this is the outcome that I want, and I'm going to create a chart that reflects that outcome. So I think it's super cool that you're
I'm gonna wait for a chart. Right? I'm not going to create anything. I'm going to wait for a particular moment.
Precisely.
Right? That's the art. It's the patience.
Yeah. All right. So speaking about all of the wonderful things that we do, I think it's super cool that we all represent such a diverse background of astrological everything. And, kudos to us, basically, for being able to represent the broad sphere and spectrum of astrology. Now, something that happened closer to the end of the summer is that I allowed people like Shakira Taborn and Demetrius Bagley to peer pressure me into entering the Twitter sphere of astrology. So I have recently gotten on Twitter, and I don't know if I joined it at the wrong time or what's going on with that, but there's been some stuff, especially in the last few weeks, on on Twitter. And I think it's an amazing thing because it brings so many people together. But there's also been, a little bit of friction, which is bound to happen whenever you bring multiple voices together. So, Sam, I know that you have some thoughts on this next topic that we're going to go into, but there was recently something that happened within the astrological world where someone was giving a presentation, used an image that people thought was a bit too sensitive and a bit too touchy, and it touched some raw places in people's hearts, and that was an image of George Floyd on the day that he died, and it depicted the way that he died, and people thought that that was a little bit too much, and it wasn't the best thought out thing that could have been done. And anyway, the long and short of it is that someone reached out to that person who made that presentation, and the response that they got was one that really didn't soothe or pacify the wound, essentially, that had been reopened for a lot of people. Sam, I want to know from you, as you watched that entire thing unfold, as a Black astrologer who's been in the community for so long and who's seen the various ebbs and flows of how we all interact with each other, how did you feel in that moment while that was unfolding?
I felt bad for Lynn because I knew that she was not handling it well. And I also probably anticipated to some degree she wouldn't, and that an apology wouldn't necessarily be enough because she didn't recognize the full nature of her offense. And I had a weird feeling where I remember one feeling I had as I was looking at it, wasn't even a thought more so, but it came with a feeling. As I was watching this on Twitter, the word good came to mind. And let me explain. The reason why I felt good, it was like good. And it was like, we're here, right? We're here. We're seeing you. And now it's also important for you to see us. So when the response came, which I thought was also insensitive, I won't say, I've come to realize saying tone deaf is insensitive to those who are hearing impaired, right? But the response when presented with like, this hurts me, as I believe the person, Jenny, she was the person who complained about it, was that, well, this is about waking up folks, and it's the same kind of image that we dealt with in terms of like an image from Vietnam, in terms of waking up folks, not realizing you're talking about waking up white folks. We didn't need to be woken up about our murder. That's kind of the key thing to recognize, that there's a shift in terms of how we talk about events that seem to be happening to all of us. They are not happening the same way. I'm having a discussion, I won't say right now because I'm talking to all of you right now, but I'm having a discussion today with another notable astrologer about what happened in France, where she's saying, well, that everyone should see those images that Samuel Paty was teaching that prompted him to get killed. And I'm like, no, everyone, I'm not justifying him being killed, but as a Muslim, we don't need to see cartoon images of the Prophet Muhammad. That's kind of the issue. Those are, no one does that in the Islamic world, but now it's for the freedom of speech. So this dialogue on how we deal with sensitivity and these particular values related to that need to happen a lot more. And I don't think our white colleagues generally really are recognizing that. And they just see like the angry mob, the angry young mob on Twitter, not realizing that these are your constituencies. These are your potential clients. These are your potential people coming to your talks, you know, who are willing to spend their, you know, challenge ducats during a quarantine. So that's how I felt in terms of looking at the full swath of this moment.
Kira, I know that you're on Astro Twitter as well. And I mean, all of us who were there, we saw the entire thing unfolding. How did you feel? I mean, just witnessing it from the outside, because I mean, you and I, we both were a part of that weekend, but I think that we both saw it as observers on the outside. How did you feel just witnessing it on the outside, and how do you think it was handled, essentially?
When I first caught wind of what was happening, I was really, really, really upset. I was really upset, mostly that image, like at first about that image being used, because I can imagine how triggering that would have been for any Black person who saw that. It's an image I personally have gone to great lengths to avoid as much as possible. And I feel like a lot of Black people have. And yeah, it just really made me mad that that people in our community, especially like people who are just entering the community and are looking for their safe space, you know, in this astrology community, like sharing something that we all love so much. And, you know, I think this person, it was her first like summit, her first like group astrology experience. And it just made me so angry that that was her her entrance into this community. And yeah, I was really upset that she had to deal with that, and that anyone had to see that, and that, you know, I was glad I wasn't there witnessing it in person, but at the same time, kind of wish I was able to be there to do something about it in the moment. Instead, I felt bad that I was just like, you know, offering condolences afterwards. And I had talked to her on DMs and stuff just to like let her know that if she needed anything, you know, I'm close with Tony and had a little bit of like insight into behind the scenes of what was happening that weekend, which like went into why the response was so slow from AU. And so I just kind of gave her more context that I had and just let her know if she ever wanted to talk to Tony or anyone at Astrology University, I'm happy to like help facilitate that. But yeah, I think that was upsetting. The response was very unsurprising to me. I was unsurprised, disappointed, but more just, again, upset that this person like had that sort of response from an elder in the community as well. It's just, I mean, partly I'm glad that at least I think this person got to see that there are so many people in the community that will stand up for, like, you know, stand up for her, stand up against things like that. And that, you know, there was a sort of like gathering around because of the incident, but it just made me mad that it had to happen in the first place and that the response was so lackluster. And that, yeah, I had to like, you know, like this is the fact that we have to keep having this like conversation and sort of like qualifying to our young Black people who are entering the community. Like, I know, like, you know, we're here, like we love you and we'll have your back. And, you know, this stuff happens and it sucks that it happens. But yeah, it just made me mad that that's kind of like where we're at right now. That we have to kind of be like, yeah, this happens, but like we're working on it, but still like I hope this doesn't like make you not want to be in the community. But that's where we're at. And, you know, I'm glad that at least it was talked about and that the discussion is happening. And while there have been really disappointing responses, I I think that it still shows that we do have a lot of strength within our community, especially amongst the Black people and the people of color within our community, and that makes me hopeful. And also, I just have to say, Sam, I doubt that you're charging these people to be having these conversations with you, but I feel like you should have some compensation for doing that labor.
Actually, I'm glad you said that, because I'm not having any conversations really with them. Anne just wrote me. She emailed me because she saw what I posted on Facebook, which, I mean, I don't know if I could charge her that. I mean, I'm doing it, but no, I'm glad you said that, because ultimately I decided I wouldn't reach out to any of these people. I didn't reach out to Anne. I didn't reach out to Lynn, because I was like, I don't need to do that, right? I mean, that I don't need to, like you said, I don't need to do that labor. You might have talked to me 10 years ago, and I might have been like, oh, I need to do something. Oh, I'm not that guy right now. So
good. I'm glad.
Thank you, though.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, I wonder what it would be like, especially at some of these larger conferences, to do D&I trainings for white astrologers, have those types of discussions or, panels where we can actually have these conversations and teach some kind of, for lack of a better phrase, cultural competency here. I mean, I feel like I didn't know that this had transpired, and I feel like shame on Lynn for not knowing better to share such an image. So I wonder what that might be worth, considering, especially at like a NORWAC or, one of these larger conferences where we tend to see a majority of white astrologers in attendance.
That's something that I've been in talks with a couple folks about. We're hoping to sort of like propose that for next year's NORWAC. It's this year. As you guys know, it was really hard to kind of come together and get that proposal done in time. But yeah, that's definitely, I think, on a few people's minds, that like it should be something required almost, especially for like bigger conferences. It's about
just
time.
Needed. Yeah. And I'm happy to help as best I can. If you want to share some of that dialogue that you've been having.
Definitely.
All right. So here's a question that I want to put out to everyone, because it's something that someone brought to me, which is, well, there's actually two questions. One of which is, if it were a Black astrologer who was having that presentation, and within the context of their presentation, they showed that image as a part of the overarching flow of what it is they were speaking about, do you think the response would have been different? Or do you think that the reaction from people would have been different if that was held by different hands?
If different, I feel like, and I was not there, I was not present for Lynn's presentation, and so I don't know. But I feel like in Black hands, that image and that subject would have been treated differently, would have been treated with a different kind of reverence and a different kind of respect. And, like that, I feel like that, like there's a possibility that there would have been a moment of silence or something, you know what I mean? Like it would have, like, it wouldn't have been like, and look at Saturn in Aquarius and cops on his dude's neck, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, I don't think that would have been the approach in the first place. I think that, I've been thinking a lot about Saturn, Pluto, and Capricorn recently, right? And a legacy of slavery and a legacy of prisons and what all this kind of stuff means. And so I think it's really likely that had a Black person used this image, then it probably would have been in that context where it's like, okay, and now we need to talk about what this legacy means and what it means for people to be enslaved for hundreds and hundreds of years, and what it means in this legacy now, and how Saturn, Pluto, I just feel like that would have been more like the treatment rather than how sort of it. Again, I did not see the talk, but the basic sentiment seems to be that it was pretty cavalier. And I don't think that a Black person would have treated it that way.
Yeah, I think it would have been treated differently. How it would have been treated differently, I don't know, but I do think it would be treated differently for sure. And I also can say, like, as myself, like, as I come out into the field more and on the internet, especially like back where I was working at, like there weren't a lot of people who were like politically correct about almost anything. I was the one that was like in my community building that up. And then I go on the internet and I see like all this stuff I don't know. And I'm like in myself learning. So I always like keep that lens as well. However, what I will say is that I always give people open invitations, and I always give people like trigger warnings are like really important, you know. So even just giving someone the option to back off, whether they should have did that or not, you know, I don't even like to. I personally, and this is me, I don't like to play with that, me personally, because what I do inside of myself, I look to help Black people and empower them. I'm not like over there worrying about what this person over here is doing. Not saying that's not for everybody, you know. And I also would say, even just now, me stepping into whatever role I'm stepping into, I want people to know like what I do is different than what you do, right? So I'm inviting people to teach me how to be more politically correct, because my lens is always Black people's nervous systems. That's what I care about before astrology, before anything. There's so much trauma that we carry as a people that I don't care about what so-and-so said. I care about how people are being regulated and how we're moving forward from a space of like owning our own resources and building our resilience. Not saying other people should not do what they're doing, not negating anything. I'm just inviting people to see that I'm coming to add a certain thing, and it might not be a lens that everybody sees, but allow me to do that and teach me, and we can all help each other go to a unified goal, even if we don't look at it the same way. So tangent, but that's what I would add.
Yeah, I would agree with both Zamboni and Cameron, and I would also add, you know, I think that the response would have been different had it been a Black person giving that kind of presentation, sharing that kind of lens, simply for the fact that it would be that Black person controlling the narrative. Even when it comes to the interpretation of whatever planet alignments are happening at that time, it would be the Black person controlling the narrative. And I think too, you know, just from a larger lens, when we talk about Black people controlling the narrative in the astrology community, that also needs to be something that is uplifted and seen and recognized, especially when we think of our ancestors, what our ancestors taught us about the stars, how our ancestral influences have, you know, really shaped the practices of astrology that vary amongst the 8 of us here. And so I think that's also something to consider, again, when it talks about how we control the narrative, what we, you know, the lens through which we teach astrology, we interpret astrology. That definitely would have made a difference too.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to see it kind of light up on Twitter as well and see what happened and look at the responses both here, there, and in the middle. And I mean, I have to tell you, I do agree if that would have been handled by a person of color, it would have been handled differently. But I got a lot of benefit of the doubt over there for Lynn. I've watched a lot of her work over the years, and I don't think in any way did she intentionally come out to cause harm. I don't think that her response was the best, but I do not believe that she came out to cause harm. And that's first and foremost a feature of what's inside of me, right? Giving a little bit of trust to somebody who doesn't look like me, that they don't have the intention to do harm, right? And so in that, she did present it. And if her lens was to awaken, and she as a white woman was able to use that image to, one, awaken other white people, then it worked. If the lens was to awaken the Black community, it worked, because we have had something to say about that, right? But in the middle of it, the thing I keep coming back to is if it's so terrible, right? If this was just not handled well, let's go get her and talk to her about, let's not demand, because I did see some of the articles and I did see some of the write-ups, and that wasn't a conversation, it was a demand. And a demand and a conversation are two different things. And this is an opportunity, if we're talking about creating a space at the table and creating our own tables or whatever that looks like, learning about all of this. How do we educate white people? How do we let them educate us as well? This has to go back and forth. It's not a one-sided change. So the thing that I keep my eye very much so on, especially when I was reading some of those articles, is I'm like, I am not about revenge. I will not be about revenge. right? If this is going to be a transformation, if this is going to be something that we're going to breathe new life into, we're going to have to sometimes go there and have the conversation of why that was culturally insensitive, maybe how this can look different. And also respect that our white colleagues have their own little something to bring to the table. We can't speak of diversity and then say no white people. That won't work. That just won't work.
Thanks a million, Stormy. And also, to add another piece, I have been a part of Lynn's work from the outside as well, and I've heard Lynn's lectures, and I've always honored her depth and her fearlessness in terms of going deep. So in a similar vein, I don't think that it was done with any malicious intention, you know? And I don't think that anyone who's sitting here really thinks that it was done in that way at all. And, you know, subsequent to the entire thing that occurred on Twitter, there was a more sensitive and a more well thought out answer or explanation or apology that came from her end. And so I believe in that. And she, as an astrologer, I believe in her work. It's something that I've cherished for a long time. And I think it's just this piece of, you know, how do we respond to things after things happen that really was problematic. But I will say this, that has nothing to do with Lynn at all or anything. Another older astrologer came to me completely out of the blue for no reason at all and was like, have you seen what's been going on Astro Twitter? And I was like, yeah, you know, that thing happened at the summit this weekend. And she said, well, Mychal, I'm very happy that you didn't get involved in the responses in that. And I was like, well, you know, I didn't really want to go there because I was one of the hosts of the summit and I really just wanted to let people do what they're doing, and fine. And she went on to say, well, I'm happy that you didn't get involved in that, because if you had gotten involved in that, it would limit your opportunity to speak at conferences. And then she went on to say, because the same people who were riling that conversation up on Twitter are people who are going to want to speak at conferences, and they won't be able to speak at conferences because of the side of the fence they were on when that conversation was going on. So be happy that you didn't get involved in it, because you don't want to bite the hand that feeds you.
I have plenty to say here, and I want to underscore what Stormy just said. Oof. I didn't know you were getting ready to throw that on the table, Mychal. So first of all, let me say, and please jump in, Kira or Sam, if I'm incorrect. That's not how conferences work. There is danger, though. There is caution. I think this astrologer's caution is right, but that's not the reality. That's not the full reality of how it works. I won't necessarily try to unpack that in this conversation. People can find me on social media or email. People are often, the legacy conferences are NORWAC excluded. They are voted in, so it is a more or less a popularity contest and name recognition. And sometimes bad publicity is good publicity is what I've seen. And I have been privy, and I still have the data for many of these. They're run as surveys, but right, they're ballots and voting, right? I'll leave that there. I want to go back to what Stormy just said, which I may have forgotten. It's something I believe all three sisters on this roundtable have said earlier in this conversation. And Stormy, you said it explicitly for your business model of what you're doing right now. You built inclusion into it. You built an openness into it, if I heard correctly. These astro orgs, unfortunately, again, I don't think it was malicious at all. I just think the mindset was very different in the 60s and the 70s and in the 80s. Aya's off the table here because it's very new and is the first response, queer astrology being a sort of group, being the second response that I'm aware of to being inclusive as far as a nonprofit. But these groups have struggled with inclusion and diversity in a lot of different ways. One of those is around class, right? And that's why you've heard affordability come up in this conversation. But I think we also will agree, because of how racism works across the globe, that disproportionately, right, if you have hue to your, if you're somewhat of hue or melanin, as it were, that you may earn less on average, right? And that is important for astrology, which I think Kira said it first this evening, is studying a language. So you need the books. I don't know if there's an app per se at this point, but you need the courses that are out there that are being created, some in person, online, and. But it costs money to get an education. Someone's got to pay that bill. That can all shift, and a few of us, if not all of us, are moving different levers to make things more accessible for people. What I also heard, I think Tracy said it in a very particular way that I didn't capture word for word early in this conversation, is, I'll play it back this way, and ironically and ortally, and even it's in your business name, per se, Sam, is unlocking astrology, making it accessible to everyone. A couple of you have said. That's not what it's been. If you talk to these, they're right, mostly baby boomers, right? That's not a pejorative for me. They're mostly white. I would say they're split depending on who we're talking about, of male, female, right? They came up in a different world, in a different time, for better and for worse. And they inherited something from their elders, which I think I spoke about in the last roundtable Mychal hosted, and. I think part of the exciting thing that we just saw, riffing off your good, Sam, is this is the time with, I think some of you, I don't think all of us, at least two of us are Gen Xers here. It's the pivot now, right? We're getting the square to the Pluto and Leo, aka the baby boomers, from you millennials, the Pluto and Scorpio. And I think that is opening up, right? So we can be more watery and sensitive to safe spaces and having a conduct. These are new things. I have been at 30 plus astrology or astrologer really conferences. We don't have these things. Lynn is one of our best astrologers, irrespective of age, irrespective of gender, race, etc. One of our best, period, full stop. Full stop. So I was kind of stunned. I'll leave Anne out for my comments tonight to keep them briefer than not. Here's what I see as a Gen Xer. If you are inviting people into your space, as Stormy explicitly said in this conversation, you have to think about and consider and vibe on that. I know you do this all the time, Kira, in very different ways. The for-profit stuff and the community stuff with the astrology dinners here in New York City. When you and many other things. When you don't, you get the reputation, and I'm going to name names here, I've been on this board. NCGR is still seen as the sorority sisters, air quotes for people just on the audio. And I was on the board over 10 years ago. That's arguably it's in the chart, ironically. But that kind of reputation has turned off younger astrologers, Xers, Y, I don't know about any Zs, a lot of women, not just women of color, white women. They didn't feel like they had the right book or teacher, right? They picked up whatever, like Cameron's example, the first book they could get their hands on, and then the second and that sequence varies for people, like based on the bookstore, the library, or the neighbor who has the books. All to say, the challenge I think astrologers are going to have in the next few years, and even have had in recent days, is welcoming people who are different and building a sense of belonging. And that's why I'm excited about producing more events and more podcasts and making more space virtually and in person. And that's not easy space to hold. Not saying it's just like hard, but this is one of the things, Kira, I'll shout you out here. I know Sam has done a lot of work with this too. We need that, not just astrologers. I think we need it across the board, across the globe. I think this is what the hashtag New Age of Air is about really saying, let's have to your point, Stormy, a conversation, or really plural, conversations and dialogues. Let's break bread, right? Or Injera, shout out to Kira again. We've got to work through that. That doesn't mean we have to like each other or love each other or work together or what have you. But I think when we're not abstracted, as unfortunately, I'm just going to say it plain, that Lynn did, I know in the moment, in the apology, that dehumanizes someone and hurts. And that's also what Anne, and I have major love for Anne O, without unpacking why and how I know her and Anne. That hurts. And let me back it up from race for a second. I have been to too many talks, and unfortunately I probably go to some more, that talk about rape in the Greek and Roman myths with respect to astrology and the planets. And it is, woof, y'all, it's wrong. So we have to, and it probably is on Xers and Ys, millennials, start to have these D&I, as you said, Tracy, in conferences that probably we create. We need to have just some guidelines. It doesn't need to be a book. It cannot be a book, even though astrologers love to read books, but just to have 5 points, 10 points, 15, maybe it's 50, I don't know. Those have to be created. And here's the good news is we can create those. AFAN is working on that right now and has solicited that publicly on Twitter, maybe by my instigation, maybe not, privately, I don't know. But now if you're waiting on boomers to bring this, no. And I don't think it's not that they don't want it. That's just not the world they're steeped in. That's the world they helped make for us to be steeped in as X's and Y's and as Z's. And so and there are boomers who want that and get it, but they're not writing it. It's just not going to happen that way, generally speaking. But the great news about this moment, this new age of air, leaving all these planets, God help us, Goddess help us, in Capricorn is we can make new structures, we can reshape, and we can take this wall out and put a new window here or close that door and off and change the roads and. But we have to understand, to your point, Kira, and to your response, Sam, the labor largely is in front of us. We don't have to pick it up. And I'm not speaking to what you declined, Sam, but there are other pieces of Sam sitting on a board, of Kira accepting to be the director of Fresh Voices, of Mychal and Stormy, I don't know if the other three of you have podcasts, having podcasts and having a diverse set of guests and being putting that out there and. We have to make the world that we want to see, and yes, it's work, and yes, there are tears, and yes, there's sweat, hopefully there's no blood. And yes, we can get paid for some of that work. And for sure, we can say no to some of the work. But some of us will have to, someone said it much earlier, stand up or grab the mic or grab the pen or the Google Doc as I'm forgetting the Twitter name, as someone did, to try to capture all these major threads. I'm making gestures with my hand if you're listening on audio. So I saw a lot of great come out of the heat of what happened. I saw and feel the pain, present tense. But I already saw some of this coming because the sexism has been rampant, even though it's been more subtle from the talks I've heard, from names that I want to cry about, won't right now, but would make you cry. I'm pausing here and wrapping up to say, we as humans, astrologers or not, Black or not, female or not, we have work to do as part of the human experience. We need to, I think you've said this on a different podcast, Sam, maybe the last panel, we need to work on being more humane, particularly as astrologers. And particularly, sorry, I got to call it out on you, all astrologers, let me say that, in different ways. I have a lot to learn about, and thank you for whoever said earlier about not saying tone deaf. Please go with sensitive, and how that reads to other people. Let me say this and leave it with these guidelines that we desperately needed obviously 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes ago as a community, if not world. When you are speaking, right, double air sign here, when I am speaking, when anyone's speaking, you are speaking to other people or another person, right? Facebook is rampant with this, I think, in a lot of negative ways. Please think about the words and the energy that you're putting out there. It's fine if you're angry, I think. I think it's fine if you're sad, and. But I was in tears yesterday and had to shut it all down because I saw 2 Black women go at each other that I know, that I went to college with, in a way that was not productive. It was not productive. And it was, it may cost me my job. It may cost me, not a paying job, but it may cost a job. It was that ugly, y'all. That's not what we need to do. That's not what I need to do. That's definitely not what any consulting astrologer, calling you out, needs to be doing on a one-on-one, in a classroom, on a podcast, etc. Think about your impact. It can be amazing, but can also be harmful. And let me say this for anybody listening, wagging their finger at me. I was a party, even as a Black queer person, as producing Queer Astrology Conference, I let shit slide that impacted people that hurt. That was definitely not what I was after. And so I invite other people to join me in making repair and correction choices going forward. Sometimes don't say anything, even if you're being called for apology. Sit with it. I know we're in an ATM world, but sit with it. All the ATMs don't give out the money right away all of the time. Sit with it. And read, Sam, we might need a media kit. I might have to raise some money for you. We've talked about it before, because I didn't necessarily know how to make an apology, because I've gotten a lot of bullshit apologies in my day. Let me stop there.
Can I just chime in, Mychal? So I just wanted to chime in with something that Stormy started talking about, because she didn't frame it this way, but we're talking about tone. And because and you also mentioned this to me, Stormy, in terms of not wanting to participate on the panel at NORWAC if it's going to be focused on revenge. And I understand that. And even at first I didn't, because I was like, what does she mean? Blah, blah, blah. Then you elucidated here. And I wholly agree with that. And I think we have to remember that we are talking about the astrology community and our relationship to it. And I think we've all voiced, I definitely have moments, our ambivalence related to how we relate or connect with this community, but it is a community, right? And has been, as you talked about, Demetrius, and Lynn have been instrumental parts of this community, and then how we talk about it. And so one of the things I want to say, especially to Gen Z, Gen Y astrologers, right? I'm not talking about mainly the ones here. And I said it on Twitter, so I'm going to say it again for those listening and watching. Ask questions rather than coming with demands. Some of you don't know what the fuck is going on, right? So I think it becomes, and I had to put it that brutal and that direct, because you're going off and you don't even know what you're going off about, right? That doesn't mean that your feelings are not valid. It doesn't mean your thoughts are not valid. But you can look at it in terms of talking about questions. I understand the anger, you know, I can manage anger really well, right? Not just manage it, I can do anger really well. But anger without a purpose just becomes destructive. And I think we have to talk about in our community how we work with our anger in a way that also bridges and creates and supports community among us as Black people and people of color, but also in terms of dealing with other people and just trying to like, well, I'm going to do this. And how many people of color do you have here? And what is this? Weren't you just born yesterday? I know that's rude, right? And I understand that, but that's just a joke. But at the same time, it is kind of conditioning some measure of humility, because I even come in with some measure of humility coming into a new situation. Like, I don't know what's going on. Let me learn. You know, like to Demetrius' point, you know, sometimes it's just best to be quiet, process, ask questions. Why is this? Why did she do that? What happened? And see where we go. I'm done.
Just to touch on your point, Sam, and then Kira and Tracy, but I definitely appreciate what you said about younger people really still knowing that their voices matter and still knowing that their opinions need to be heard. But there is something very, I'm trying to find the politically correct word to use, but there's something very volatile about that type of anger that you described, Sam, because it just lashes out. And I think in 2020, we've definitely seen a lot of people having a very righteous anger. that just lashes out or just attacks because there seems like another thing that needs to be attacked. And so, truthfully, I sat in a place where I was surprised at both sides. I was surprised that the thing happened, period, because that's probably something that somebody could have said, hey, let's probably not do that. That's not going to be the best idea. But then the level of vitriol and the level of angst that I saw on Twitter, and people really, 2020 has brought up this whole thing of cancel culture. and people really calling for a person to be canceled based on them doing something that other people felt was insensitive. I really think calmness would have been the thing that's needed, especially from a lot of the people who were, pointing fingers and saying, let's never let a person do this thing, or let's never feature this person again. I think that's really a sign of immaturity in a sense, because like we've all acknowledged here, the people in question are contributors to our field, and we've been enriched by their work. And so, let's calm down the cancel culture over here, and let's really, like Stormy said, hold space for us to break bread with people, because that act is so important for us to, because we're all learning how to navigate life right now in 2020, and people do crazy stuff. So that's me. Kira?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with what you all have been saying. I think it's really important to put into context, like we're talking about Gen Z here who has Pluto in Sagittarius. So yes, they are volatile. Yes, they are reactive. And I just want to honor that anger, because I think especially people of color were always kind of told to, your anger isn't justified. And I want to honor that. And I want to honor the fact that these young people are really fed up and impatient. I want to honor that. And I also want to honor the fact that, like, yeah, you have to be patient. And that everything's not going to happen. The progress that we're pushing for, you need patience. Like better, don't let good be the enemy of better. What is that phrase? Something like that. Barack Obama said it really well. But I guess what I wanted to just run back to what you originally said, what this person said to you, and the blood boiling, the way my face, that made me so angry. And I think it made me angry because what it says is that you have to, shut up, be the model minority, look cute, look pretty, in order to be taken seriously by the establishment, in order to have a chance within our community. Am I allowed to curse?
Go, be yourself.
Fuck all of that. Like, you should be allowed to stand up you should be allowed to stand up for what you believe in, and call out bullshit when you see bullshit without being afraid that it's going to cost you your future in this community. That's not the case. I just really want young people out there to know that is not the case. Yes, you need to be professional, whatever professional means. Yes, you should be considerate, compassionate. I'm not saying that, some people said really fucked up things about Lynn and Anne that I absolutely do not endorse. And I never would. But at the same time, that's an extreme. There's people that were calling out things that should have been called out. And, I just want to underscore that, like, you expressing your beliefs and your feelings about what happened, if it doesn't necessarily appease the older generation, that does not mean that you don't have a place within this community. I just really had to say that. Like, that Fresh Voices is here for you. My show is here for you. Mychal's show is here for you. QX here for you. Like, there are spaces, and there are going to continue to be more spaces. Yeah, I just really had to say that, like, they are not the standard. Like, these conferences are not the only standard, and that's not what you need to be like aspiring towards as an astrologer. Yeah, I'm stoked to be speaking at NORWAC next year. I'm stoked to have spoken on the astrology podcast. Like, these are things that me 7 years ago when I first got into this field 8 years ago, these are things that were like huge career goals of mine. That doesn't need to be your goal. And there's other opportunities out there for you to, to shine within this community. So I just really had to say that.
And I'm going to say one thing to that, Kira. Thank you so much for holding space for that, and thank you so much for bringing that up, because truthfully, the last time anyone had ever said to me not to bite the hand that fed me was probably my grandmother 15 years ago or something, and it carries a very specific connotation, and it carried a very specific feeling that automatically got me in the frame of mind to think, so how am I going to really create a table for myself? Because if there are people within our community that still hold on to this concept that we as the Black astrological community are being fed, or we're being given opportunities, or we need to, shut up and sit down, it really got me thinking about what can I create for myself that is essentially inalienable, that isn't dependent on someone else giving me an opportunity because they have a quota to fill, and not necessarily because it has anything to do with any talents they think I might have. So yeah, Kira, yeah, QAC is here, the Astrology Show is here, the True Divination Podcast is here. We're here for the new generation. Tracy?
Yeah, thank you, Kira, too, for saying what you said. I think this is the point in time where we start looking at our path forward within the community as Black astrologers from this both and lens, as opposed to an either or lens. What everybody here has just described is what's often referred to in activist communities as dream liberation, right? So like liberating ourselves to dream what we want this community to look like in the future. And while, yes, we do have to be inclusive, we do have to have conversation, we do have to invite people to the table, no matter your race, ethnicity, background, culture, we also have to set a precedent. And I think that there is a fine line between what we describe as cancel culture and just setting precedents and saying, this is not something we're going to tolerate going forward. So I think we have to hold both and lens, right? And then even when we talk about intention, well, there's intention and then there's impact. And so we also have to be mindful of how this shows up together and how we respond to someone's intention versus the impact that they had. So I think that, I'm so glad we're talking about this. I think that this is a conversation that obviously needs to continue. Especially as we continue to kind of brainstorm and dream about what the future of this community looks like.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, the whole both and thing. A lot of times lately when I give presentations, I've been talking about like what's called spectrum consciousness, and understanding that there is a spectrum that's happening. And it's like, yes, it's a both and that's polarity, but understanding that there's like the whole spectrum on that polarity, and knowing like where people land on it. Because if you know where people land on it, the way you respond to it, you can take more emotional responsibility and maturity for what you're doing and put the boundaries where they belong with that person. So like keeping that spectrum open, it allows you to navigate in the way that you can, be emotionally mature and hold yourself up, but also hold other people accountable. And those two things don't even have to look quote unquote different, or like, yes, both and also the whole spectrum. And like knowing it's like a very dynamic thing. And look how that's happening within yourself. Because when people are getting very angry, and I'm speaking on the Black community and their adrenal glands, when they get angry, their adrenal glands go up. We already have too much trauma in our lineage, in our DNA. Please be mindful of that. So yeah, that's all I want to say.
Now, Tracy, I love that point that you made earlier about this dream that we're all able to build together, and how that dream is fundamentally a dream of liberation. And recently I've been thinking about how astrology has always been an emancipatory discipline. It's always been a touchstone for people to be able to connect directly with the divine in an organic and a nature-based way that didn't require the intercession of the Pope or the pastor or the priest or inevitably some other man who held the truth. And what I want to ask you all, and I'm going to put it on the table for everyone to respond if you like, is how do you think your contribution to astrology moving forward can be of benefit, or probably even what do you want your specific presence within the astrological community to engender as we dream up this new future?
I think for me, it comes down to wanting to create a safe space, right? So millennial, but really, I really care deeply about people who want community, and want to find community through astrology, and having a soft place for them to land. Like I think I'm so passionate about astrology, just like as a discipline, as a language, as a science, as an art, whatever, as a tool. And I think that for me personally, it's like, this is my community. This is a place out of all the places that I've, all the different spaces that I've inhabited in my life. This is a place that I feel at home in. And yeah, it's not all the time comfortable, maybe not comfortable most of the time, but it's a place where I found people that can speak the same language that I speak. And it's really important to me that folks who are in search of that find a pocket within this community that feels comfortable for them. And it's important to me that this community feel inviting and safe and warm for them too. And particularly talking about Black people, Indigenous people, people of color, and people who have disability. And yeah, I hope that in some way, shape, or form, my involvement in the community can make the space a little safer for those folks. Yeah, and I don't think I'm very new and beginning that journey, but that is something, that's kind of what I'm hoping. I'm hoping to kind of carve out a space just to make people feel like, they found their place, if this is where they feel that they're meant to be. And then with that, I guess also really, I think quality education is another big thing for me. Basically, I want folks to be able to, like, if they want to learn astrology, to be able to learn it, and to learn quality astrology in an accessible way. And so that's another piece as well that I hope to somehow to, make better within this community. Yeah.
Thank you, Kira.
Was it Demetrius earlier who was talking about generating about affordability and accessibility and these kinds of things? I see the internet as being a great democratizing force around education generally, not just around astrology, but certainly around astrology. I learned astrology for damn near free. Thanks, Chris Brennan. Shout out to Chris Brennan on that. And so when it comes to my practice, then, I am strongly concerned with the democratization of this information. And so I do my daily forecast, for example, right? I write daily forecasts, and it's all on Instagram, and Instagram is very image based, right? So I live in New York City, and so there's street art all around. There are murals and all sorts of stuff. And so I write something about what the stars say about today, and then I illustrate it with art that I found around the city. And I typically, I don't really like to post pictures of white people. I do sometimes, but by and large, I post pictures of people of color or animals or scenes or whatever, right? But when it comes to my practice and the thing that I'm doing here in the community, it's very much about sort of like giving people a regular place to go for astrology content that is not necessarily the same white lady view of the world that is so very common. And so when I'm sort of, I do a lot to mix image and text and music and like this, it's sort of Ptolemaic in a way, where it's like the sort of the one universal scheme of the world. The whole world is kind of the one thing, and there's this, like you ride it in the one way, right? Or the multiplicitous ways of writing the one thing. And so my content is very much and I give most of my content away for free, honestly. I do the dailies and the weeklies for free, so it's very accessible. Anybody has access to them as long as you have like a phone or whatever. But so it's about doing that in a way that is accessible and affordable, but then also like has this sort of diversity component that I don't ever mention. I don't really talk about being Black. I simply post pictures of Black people while talking about stars.
Yeah, so to begin with, I want to start off by making a very large distinction between my practice and what I want to bring to the community, because those two things are way different. From my lens, what I see when I'm, especially like, I contextualize things based off Twitter for the most part, because that's where I came into the community at, and NORWAC. Appreciate you, Sam, for allowing that diversity, scholarship, and stuff like that. Okay, anyway, yeah, so the way I look at it is I want astrologers to make sure that they're human first, because I feel like, I feel like they don't. And in my reality, I see people who have 401ks and don't know how to go to the bathroom properly. Like just like very simple things. Like, can we be human first before we try to be a specialist in astrology? Like, that's what I want to bring. And I also want to question things that people aren't questioning. And yeah, so I like to add. I don't necessarily like to talk about what everybody's talking about all the time. I'm just like, what about this? Can we push it further? Can we go deeper? Because for me, like, I don't necessarily like being part of communities where we can't talk about things and we can't grow together. So that's what I'm here for, honestly. And that might change over time. However, in this moment of existence, that's where I'm at. So open invitation for people to tune in or not. Yeah, so that's me.
Well, I mean, first, thank you so much for creating this space. I just like last time, I didn't know I needed it until everything was said and done. So I'm just really grateful to be here again and to share space with all of you. And Mychal, I really appreciate what you said about, how this practice is such a true form of liberation, and it allows for us to connect in divine ways to a higher power, to a higher source without the dictates of religion and doctrine. That is so true. And that's probably the one thing, or one of the top three things that I love most about being an astrologer, is that, especially in my one-on-one consultations, I get to have these really beautiful, divinely timed conversations with people that I would never have otherwise. And when we're coming together to the space, it's not what is your race, what is your religious background, what is your ethnicity, it's what do the stars have to say. And so I think that's a really beautiful experience that I just know is a privilege as a professional consulting astrology, and I'm grateful that I get to do this for a living. And if there's anything that I would want to bring to the community, I think definitely safe space, to what Kira said, and I would add brave space. We've been having this this year in particular has been unrelenting. And I've been having some really challenging, eye-opening, triggering conversations with folks as a result. And these conversations are impacting me personally as well, like in bigger ways than what I've experienced before. And so if anything, I would want to create a brave space where we can have really courageous conversations, and in a way that brings a greater kind of liberation and transformation, courtesy of the stars. So that's what I would want to bring to the community.
Yeah, thank you again. This has been absolutely brilliant. And I think you're all brilliant. And I'm so grateful to be here with you. And, you know, when I think about that, this is a part of what I want to give to our community, is I want to show up hands open, ready to be that kind of servant leader and give, you know, and I want to show up in a way where in astrology specifically, I can be brave enough to speak to Tracy, to show up as an astrologer, just an astrologer, not afraid that someone will take my blackness or my femininity or my anything. Just by showing up in astrology to give to astrology, I naturally will get the courage to give everything that comes from my perspective of this journey. And that's really what I want to bring to the table. Just the openness for people to do the same and to learn and to grow in this particular profession. And I also want to give the other side, right? That accessibility. Absolutely. I built a business in this community that is accessible. If you want to learn content, it's out there for free. Go and get it. But also that sometimes accessibility means full price. And those people are okay as well, right? Like that is okay. That accessibility means accessibility for whomever the demographic is that's coming to the table, you know, so, and to honor other people that feel that same way as well. Because I think it is very hard to hear sometimes in the context of how we speak to it, accessibility, and have it mean that I'm now obligated based on this community to adjust my business model to make you feel good and safe. Like that doesn't work either, right? So accessibility in terms of the openness that all of us provide just by doing, being, and giving to astrology. So that's what I hope to bring. And all the fucking fashion, all the fucking lip gloss, and all the fucking snacks. That's for real. I feel very confident about those things. So if you come to my space, you'll get it. That's what you'll get. And a whole bunch of astrology in between.
All right, come through, Taurus. Well, I'm going to let people know, Stormy, that you and I are actually born on the same day, May the 4th. So I completely resonate with all of that. All right, Demetrius.
Thank you for doing the podcast overall. I think it's inspiring in many ways, and certainly this roundtable part 2. Your question is so big, and I have played with it a lot this year. I forget how you just said, Tracy. I'll say this right now where I'm at, and it's shifting because there's a lot happening on my natal chart, even today, actually. I have spent a lot of time in the volunteer trenches of astrological organizations and a couple meetups. And part of what I see, as Stormy has spoken to a couple, at least twice in this conversation, is we need, what I want to share and observe further aloud and bring is there are better and best practices that are available to us. And certainly we've talked about some of those tonight, maybe in terms of communications and culture. I may mean more the numbers of dollars and things like that. And I have a lot to say about that. Totally different thing. Operating models, you could say. I think by making the field of astrology better, which is part of my goal, that makes astrologers better. And that makes the toolkit going out to people, students, clients, and better. Because before I started learning astrology, it was very strong in my energy, if I can say it that way. The work of the 21st century will be for humans to emotionally evolve and catch up to what the technology was, which was well before smartphones and really the internet got underway. And in 2020, for worse and for better, that has been underscored in so many ways for me. A couple of you said earlier, in a way I'm not able to play back precisely right now, but someone when their charts not just explained to them, but dialogued and unpacked for them. Wow, right? The liberation, I think, is the word that three of you used. What does that look like when we start, and I am going to use a business term here, scaling that out? And I'll just leave that. I want to be doing work that continue to do work that feeds and adds to that, because hopefully I said before already in this conversation, I'll shout out Sam because it's very much part of his brand, and I want to shout out Ann O, who is human, right? And we all do make mistakes. Astrology is for everybody. So we need all of the astrologers, the Black, the sissies, I'm gonna say, the fashionable, because most of us are not necessarily at these conferences, and. The key to that is work I have to do within, to I think Cameron's point, but also what Kira is an amazing champion of at least one of us here. We have to welcome ourselves as astrologers, so our clients, our students, and feel welcome. But coming around and finishing it for me, better and best practices.
I'm gonna touch on something that you said about the whole concept of scaling astrology out, but I'm gonna let Sam go because I know we have to wrap up.
Okay, well, first I want to just thank you, Mychal, for again holding this space for us again and doing what you do. When I say doing what you do, you know, you've been on my radar for a while, right? You know, in terms of, you know, you see people kind of come up, you know, sometimes disappear, but I knew you were going to be around to stay when you got John Frawley on your show, right? And be like, because who gets crotchety John, we love you. Crotchety John Frawley out to talk. I was like, oh, he's gifted. That's how I felt about you. All right. Anyway, I know you've done a lot of other people, but I just stood that. I was like, wait, what? So I also want to say to my brother Cameron, because sometimes he and I go at it on Twitter, right? You know, we have our moments. But one of the things, like everything you said in terms of talking about the one thing and being human, I was like, yo, stay out of my head. And that's kind of the lessons of, you know, fixity. I just observed. I mean, I don't remember your placements, Zamboni and Tracy.
Wait, Sam, I also observed this. I just had to say
that there's a lot of fixity on here. And I'm like, wow. We got that. We got the Taurus. We got the Aquarius.
All of us except Tracy,
Scorpio.
I think.
Right. I don't know. Yeah, I don't remember Tracy's.
I'm a Leo.
Oh my God. All of us are fixed signs. All of us.
We have assembled.
There's two of each, and then there's one Leo, of course,
so
in the center of my
fixity.
screen.
And I'm like, we kind of vibe of each other, even though sometimes we have like as a quadruplicity, but at the end of it, and that's kind of the power of it, there's a way of an understanding. So, you know, and I knew it was there, Cameron. I mean, like, and then we're going to go back to it, you know, some other day. It's like, yo, whatever, you know, and then, but that's the love. I think the other thing, you know, before I go into my answer your question, because, you know, I get emotional with these particular moments, is just to say something to my other Aquarian brother, Demetrius, right? Because this is where I do get emotional. You know, it was just me and him for a long time at these conferences, at these, you know, meetings, right? And to see the growing number of people getting involved, not just in terms of the community, but doing their astrology and studying and being diligent about it, just does so much for me, right? It validates the work we've done and the work we're doing. So, I mean, that's to all of you, right? And that's saying like, oh yeah, we kind of paved the way. There were those who came before us. So I mean, we're acknowledging them as well, but we're in the room with you. That's the only difference. So they're in the room with us in a different way. So I just do want to acknowledge that. For me, drawing on our ancestors, speaking of Ralph Ellison specifically, in one of his books, Shadow and Act, and specifically an essay I would encourage you to read called The World in the Jug, he talks about, I mean, he uses the word Negro. He's talking about us when we were Negroes, right? The discipline of being a Negro, right? And he saw the discipline of being a Negro, not just like being a good Negro, but going on what Cam said, it's the discipline of being human through the experience of being Black, right? And that's kind of what I believe, you know, that's how I really look at my Blackness, because I don't believe in essentialism. You know, I already went through my Black nationalist moment. You know, it's like, oh, we Black, blah, blah. There's no one Black thing or Blackness in that sense. It is like, it is vast, right? As we are vast. And that means that by virtue of standing in that vastness, we're dealing with our humanity. So my hope in the work that I do related to astrology is by articulating this Blackness and pulling in more people, we also articulate and broaden our sense of humanity. So I think that is my aspiration also in relation to whoever, whether we're Asians, like one of the people I mentor is Alexis Duong, right? Who's Vietnamese and Chinese. So I also talk about the aspect of how I work my Blackness in relation to her Asianness, right? And how that works, but it's all centered in one thing, our humanity. And that's the key articulation of what we're looking for. So that's one. And then the other thing, you know, especially in terms of talking on Twitter and all the other things I do, because I decided to be committed to education some 15 years ago. And, you know, many people don't know this. I think Demetrius knows this. I was not about trying to be in orgs or that astrology life. I was like, I don't need y'all, fuck you. I don't, for what? What are you're just going to get in my way, right? You're just going to be a problem for me. Until I realized I cared so much about education. And when I say education, not that there is a certain such right way to learn or know astrology. Some people might think that about me, but I really, of my students and of anybody, I only want one thing: know your why, right? Doesn't have to be my why, but you should know your why. So if I kind of come and ask questions and poke and whatever, if you just tell me, like, Sam, I just woke up on Tuesday, I felt like this way, and I just wanted to use Saturn as the ruler of Uranus, the ruler of Aquarius. That's it. If you just said that to me, I would be like, all right, that's it. What am I going to say? But if you kind of say, well, no, we'll see, blah, blah, and then you don't know your why. And that's all I want in terms of, you know, in terms of my education and teaching and work. Just know your why, and let's explore our humanity. That's it.
Ooh. Humanity through astrology. I think that that's such a big thing, Sam. And I've always personally held within myself that our astrology should broaden and enable us to broaden and widen the parameters that define who and what we can love. Because what we find in astrology is a language that transcends everything. And we're sitting down here at this Black Astrologers Roundtable right now because that is our experience within these bodies on this material earth plane. But even deeper than that, I think astrology allows us to acknowledge the spark of the divine within each and every one of us. And that, for me, is really the humanity that I'm seeking to expand within myself through my astrological practice. Because no matter who you are, where you're from, what you've been through, our astrology gives us a common ground to understand, okay, you know, on the outside, you seem like you're just a miserable sort of person, but I know your chart. And I've seen your chart, and I've seen you. And based on this astrological language, I can respect the sort of person who you are a bit more, because I realize that is you. That is you, and I love you and I honor you for the diversity of the universe that you express through yourself by being the miserable person who you are, because that is who you are, and I can respect that. So definitely let our astrology broaden our humanity for sure. And to wrap up, just to touch on something that Demetrius said about really knowing that we are the natural magicians within the lives of these people who come to us. You know, we perform magic. We perform miracles within the lives of people. And we do that every single time we have a one-on-one consultation with someone. So how can we scale that? And how can we as astrologers, through having better practices and the best practices, prepare for a tomorrow in which astrologers will be called on far more strongly than they're being called on right now to really spearhead the revolution that this world is moving towards. And I know that all of you know that I'm a Renaissance astrologer, but I am very much a Uranian astrologer as well. And the Uranian astrologers are waiting for 2025 because according to Uranian astrology, 2025 is the year of the return of the astrologer. So I just want to charge all of you to, yes, pick up that Herculean task of rooting yourself in better and best practices, because we're moving towards a world that's going to call on each and every one of us to show the fuck up and to really step forward and show people that within this astrology that we hold, we do hold magic. So that's about it. Oh, as always, it is wonderful to be here with each and every one of you. I love every single one of you from the bottom of my heart. And thank you all for coming and sharing in this space with me once again here at our Black Astrologers Roundtable.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mychal.
Yeah, this was amazing. Thank you so much.
And to our listeners and viewers out there, if this is your 100th time joining us here on the Oraculos True Divination podcast, or if this is time number 1, I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming and sharing in this virtual astrological space with each and every one of us. I receive your love, your comments, your feedback, but most importantly, I receive your encouragement. So if you want to continue to be a part of the magic and the momentum that we're building here on the Oraculos True Divination podcast, give yourself a moment, go down below and like this amazing conversation with these amazing trailblazers within this field of astrology that we know and love. And subscribe to the Oraculos True Divination podcast, but also share this podcast with your other astrologically and magically minded friends, because more and more people need to know about these amazing conversations that we're having with these amazing astrologers from all around the world. So until next time, I'm your host, Mychal A. Bryan, leaving you in peace and love and hope until we meet again. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Peace.
Bye.
Peace.
Bye-bye.
Wait, can I just say, so we have 2 Tauruses, 2 Aquariuses, 3 Scorpios, and one
Leo.
and one Leo. How do we? That is amazing.
Because we're all going in one direction, hopefully.
Yes.
That is amazing. Wow.
Anytime I've been at an astrological gathering, usually in person, right? Of course, it always sort of just emerges or can emerge naturally. There's always some sort of pattern, whether it's 3 of us, 5 of us, 20, not necessarily a whole conference, but it's always interesting. I was surprised when you said it. I was like, no. And I was like, oh, I don't
Write it all down.
Kira wrote it down.
He had it down already. Wow. Yeah. It was hitting me. I was just like, wait. Oh, okay. Wow.
So now I'm curious, Kira, to go back through the edit after you have, or when you release it, Mychal.
Yeah.
To see how that shows up. Because if you hadn't said that, and then you told me months from now, I'd be like, no. But then I might have emailed or like clicked on people's Facebook.
Yeah.
But
I think we have a lot of mutable risings here too. So
Yeah.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
yeah.